Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Hello. Good evening, and welcome to this club dinner, Mind Your Manners, in conversation with Sara Jane Ho. My name is Lee Williamson. I am the president of the Foreign Correspondents Club Hong Kong. My guest this evening, of course, is Sara Jane Ho, an internationally renowned etiquette expert and host of the Daytime Emmy-nominated Netflix show Mind Your Manners. Harvard Business School graduate Sara Jane is the founder of China's first ever etiquette school and also the co-founder and CEO of Antevorta, a wellness brand inspired by traditional Chinese medicine. Her new book, Mind Your Manners, an insider's guide to social fluency, which guides readers on how to thrive socially in any situation, is out now. Please join me in welcoming Sara Jane Ho.
Thank you very much.
So, are we good? Can we hear Sara Jane?
Can you hear me, everybody? Okay, perfect.
Excellent. Sara Jane, welcome. Fantastic to have you at the FCC. If you're game, I want to begin with a bit of a quick fire round to break the ice.
Let's do it.
It's Friday evening after all. Some wine is flowing. Let's maybe have a bit of fun and get to know the person behind the persona. Okay, so the quick fire round, start the clock. Sara Jane, what's your biggest guilty pleasure?
Reading the Daily Mail.
In a press club, no less, you admitted that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. What's your favorite quote?
Ooh, my favorite quote. There's so many. Oh, shared sorrow is half the sorrow. Shared joy is double the joy.
I love that. Coffee or English breakfast tea?
I haven't been drinking coffee for 10 months. I sleep so much better because of it. I'm an English breakfast tea kind of girl.
So you, of course, span two worlds with your etiquette instruction. English breakfast tea or green tea?
Ooh, still English breakfast.
Excellent choice. I'm in good company here this evening on this stage. What would be your last meal on death row?
Monkfish liver.
That's a surprising one.
I just had it last night. It was top of mind.
Okay. Who's your ultimate style icon?
Ooh. Hailey Bieber?
Good manners cost nothing, as my mother always told me, and still tells me. What do bad manners cost?
Oh, bad manners cost you friends.
You are a globally renowned etiquette expert. Is it true that you broke up with a boyfriend by text?
It is, and he's a member of this club. It's a shame he didn't sign up tonight.
You should have texted him and asked him to come.
I'm sure he received the email, Lee.
He did. I'm sure he did. I love that little angle. I did not know that one. What is your biggest etiquette pet peeve?
Ooh, when people over-apologize.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
When people say sorry too much or they're apologizing too much for something, that's my pet peeve.
I love that. I won't be apologizing for asking you the slightly cheeky question then, in which case, let's move on. Conversely, what is the most off-brand thing that you do when no one is watching?
There are so many. Oh, well, I love clubbing. I'm a big clubbing girl, and everywhere the last 2 weeks I was in London, Italy, Kuala Lumpur, and my friends who really know me, they know to set aside one night of nightlife.
Oh, wow, okay.
It comes with growing up in Hong Kong and having gone to Lan Kwai Fong at the age of 16.
Just around the corner if you want to relive those days. Your book is about social fluency. You obviously meet a lot of celebrities through your work. Who is the most socially fluent celebrity you've ever come across?
I absolutely love Drew Barrymore. So I spend half my time in the States now, and in the States I'm between LA and New York. The reason I'm in New York is because I tape with her on the Drew Barrymore show. So I'm her resident etiquette expert, and she is just an incredibly authentic person who's lived the lowest of the lows and the highest of the highs, all in the public eye, all by the age of 15. And she's able to have so much empathy for everybody she meets, and she's so open and authentic.
Fantastic. How would you finish this sentence? Don't let anyone ever tell you dot, dot, dot.
What can't be done? If somebody says no, you're asking the wrong person.
What's the most surprising thing about filming a TV show that you only find out when you start doing it?
That you have to have, that to make a good show, you need to make people laugh and you need to make people cry. And when I was, and so if you think about Queer Eye, right? How many people have watched Queer Eye here? It's a great show and it makes you laugh, it makes you cry. The heroes who are made over are very memorable. Now, who here has seen Marie Kondo's show? I love her book, but who here has seen her show? The heroes are not very memorable. The only memorable person is, oh, I just realized this is being recorded. Okay, so.
Redacted.
Redacted. And so when I was shooting the show, let's say for an episode, I'm telling you a little bit about how the sausage is made here. My directors, we'd have our huddles before each scene, and they'd say, okay, Sara Jane, in this episode, with William, we have a lot of laughs. We need some tears now. So I'd be thinking, like, how do I make a grown man cry?
Poke him.
I was like, I need to put him with a big animal. Because he had his guards up, and he was trying to find a romantic relationship. Because I want to put him with a big animal, I need to put him with a horse. They called LA, the Netflix producer's like, is that what she'd really do? Okay, go find a stable. 24 hours later, we found a stable. I had him, a horse, me, in an arena. And my director was standing behind the camera and going, and I was like, okay, guys, how long do we have here? And they said, 5 minutes. So I thought, okay, I need to make a grown man cry in 5 minutes in front of 3 cameras. So the first thing I said to him was, close your eyes, right? Because, I mean, then he doesn't see the cameras. And he's really feeling himself, every vibe of his energy.
Yeah.
That was a long answer, I know.
No, that's a great answer. You want to make a man cry in 5 minutes, you could break up with him by text. Finally, I'm going to ask you my favorite FAQ that you answer in your book, which I just loved every page of. And if you haven't got one as you came in, do so, because you answer this FAQ, but I want to hear you talk more about it. Is it ever acceptable social etiquette to fart in a lift if you are alone?
Yes, because technically nobody is around you, so you're not offending anybody, but it would be very embarrassing if somebody you knew walked in after you.
So do it at your own risk.
Do it at your own risk. And if you fart at, let's say, the dinner table, then you should leave the offending area immediately without saying anything and come back in a couple minutes.
Diners, you have been forewarned.
This FAQ is in my book, which is right over there for sale afterwards, which I'll sign.
Sarah Jane, thank you for being such a great sport during the quickfire round. A round of applause for Sara Jane, please. Let's ask you some proper questions now, shall we? When did you first start paying attention to our social norms, our etiquette, our unspoken cultural codes that we all follow? In your book, you talk about a key moment when you left Papua New Guinea as a child and you went to England and the funny dress codes of those stuffy old Brits. Was that the key moment? When did you first start paying attention to etiquette?
So my parents were both born and raised in Hong Kong, but my father was in oil exploration. And so we lived in Papua New Guinea for the first few years of my life, where I basically walked around naked all the time, on the beach, in the garden, in the volcanic craters. And then we moved to the UK, where I had to put on uniform. And I attended school in the UK. And then when I moved to Hong Kong, I thought I was white. I was like, what are all these Chinese people doing here? Because I'd been, started my school in the UK, where like everybody was really English. I would say that my sensibilities for etiquette came to me because of my mother, who's a typical Hong Kong tiger mother. I can imagine a bunch of people here have had tiger mothers, or maybe you are a tiger mother.
I see some nodding.
So, there are pros and cons of having a tiger mom, but one of the great pros of Hong Kong mums and aunties is that they really know how to discipline you and make you sensitive to how to take care of other people. So, and it seems like somebody had a really tiger mom over there. And so whenever we were at family dim sum or with family friends, if somebody's teacup was half empty, my mother would be kicking me under the table as a reminder to go fill that person's teacup. And that was how I was raised. My mom would always say one phrase. She'd always, and I regret that I didn't put this in the book. She always said, live like a local. So if I had any question like, oh, which restaurant, if you're traveling, which restaurant should we go to? Or what should we do? Or this or that? She'd say, live like a local. What would a local do? And my dad always had a phrase for me, which was, well, he told me two things. Firstly, that he treats everybody the same, no matter who they are, whether it's a cleaning lady in his office or Margaret Thatcher, who you met a number of times. He treats everybody with the same amount of courtesy and respect. And he always would tell me, the world is your playground, go explore. So for somebody who grew up in Hong Kong, I became an English literature major, which was very unusual. I went to Phillips Exeter Academy in the States, and then I went to Georgetown University. And I remember coming home to Hong Kong, and my aunties and uncles would say, what is Sara Jane going to major in? And I'd say English literature. And they would say, oh, but her English is already so good. You know, and then obviously it's not a useful major, all these sorts of things. But I feel that my parents really encouraged me to follow my passions, and that as long as you have a passion and you work very hard, you can pretty much achieve whatever you want to achieve.
So that was where that first spark came from, that first interest in these cultural norms and codes and etiquettes. Tell us about your early motivations and perhaps what still motivates you to teach etiquette to your students, to the world, through your books and your TV show. For you, as you go into in the opening chapters, this is quite a personal mission. Is that right?
It is. So I also grew up with my mother being an incredible hostess in the home, and she would create these magical moments between people who were meeting for the first time. Dinner parties at our house, Christmas would be dozens of people at our house, and it was very warm, and it was very fulfilling. But when I was 21 years old, in my last semester of Georgetown University, I lost it to cancer. And my life really changed. My previously full home became very empty, very lonely. My father didn't entertain in the same way. He got remarried very quickly. And holidays were particularly painful because it was a stark reminder of what I had lost. So when I was thinking, because afterwards I did my MBA at Harvard Business School, and when I was thinking, what do I want to do for my career, really, I knew two things. Firstly, I wanted to move to mainland China. Secondly, I wanted to do my own startup. And so with these two sort of goals, I was thinking, what can fit in there? And I thought, well, what if I could combine what is my mother's legacy, so I could continue her legacy, with what I love. I'm a Sagittarius, my friends are my family, and with what I thought was a market need in China. And China, in 2012, when I graduated, at that time was becoming a global power. And I often say that no other country has gone through so much change in such a short amount of time. So when you think about the Industrial Revolution in Europe, that took 150 years to play out, right? Same for the US. Well, in China, you had the Industrial Revolution, the Services Revolution, Technological Revolution, all in 30 years. And that creates a huge amount of pressure, not just for the government in terms of pollution, congestion, overpopulation, but also for the individual human psyche. A lot of my students who are very affluent women, the ones who were born in the 60s or 70s, they say that when on their birthdays, their parents would give them an egg. That's how poor they were. And now they have all the resources and status and wealth in the world, but they wanted to know how to move through the world a bit more confidently and gracefully in a global world. So all that came together, and in 2012 I moved to Beijing, and in 2013 I opened the doors of Institute Sarita, my finishing school, which is not for kids, it's for adult women.
So let's move on to the nature of etiquette itself. Some people think that etiquette is the clothes you wear and when. Don't wear white after Labor Day and so on. Some people think it's the fork you use for each course. Your take is fork that, if you will. You use etiquette in a different way. What is etiquette for you?
It's so funny because a lot of times people will come up to me and they'll say, oh, Sara Jane, I have really bad etiquette because I'm too honest. And to me, that person doesn't really understand the spirit of etiquette. A lot of people think, oh, it's restricting. You can't say what you think or what you feel. You can't set boundaries. You have to lie. But actually, to me, etiquette is enabling. It's about identifying in a room who you want to speak to and having the tools and courage and confidence to approach them and make a good impression in a short amount of time, right? And then know when to end the conversation so you're not totally filling up their time, and knowing how to exit a conversation gracefully without offending, or knowing how to say no to something, to set boundaries without offending. But I would say for me, etiquette is really about making other people around you feel at ease, which is what makes you feel comfortable with them. And that goes back to what makes us human beings, which is a sense of belonging and inclusion.
We've been having dinner together this evening, Sara Jane. Dare I ask, marks out of 10?
20.
Oh, that's etiquette, ladies and gentlemen, right there. I can tell you I do not deserve a 20. Earlier this month, in fact, the Hong Kong government launched a campaign called Let's Go the Extra Mile, which aims to encourage polite manners among the catering, retail, and taxi industries. You've been in Hong Kong for a few hours, perhaps taken a taxi, gone into a store, eaten at a restaurant. How are we, Hong Kong, doing? What would you give us out of 10?
Well, so I think Hong Kong is at an interesting place right now. It's sort of the best of both worlds and the worst of both worlds, right? We're a mix of British colonial influence and now, returning to China. And I think even as our identity, it can be a little confusing sometimes. Like even for me as a Hong Konger, I adopt the British aspect when I want to, and then when I go to China, I'm really, really mainland. So to the point that my parents are like, "Gosh, what happened to our daughter?" But I think also there are a lot of more important factors at play, which has led to the majority of people in Hong Kong being very unhappy, and that is things that actually, when President Xi Jinping made a trip to Hong Kong, I think it was last year, he said, people need to have homes. People need to have homes that they can live in. And this is the biggest problem. And this is one of many problems. But I think when youth sees no hope, when they don't see a future, then they're going to be unhappy. And hurt people hurt people. So when people are rude, when people aren't nice, there's something going on in there. They're not happy. And I think that's what we have to be empathetic about.
It's like what any therapist will tell you. If you want to help others, you've got to first help yourself.
And therapy is the best investment that I did for myself, and that all my friends, my difference between friends who are in fulfilled and committed relationships and those who are not is therapy.
Amen to that. In your book, you talk a lot about social fluency. What is social fluency? Can you explain it to us?
Well, when I think of myself as an etiquette expert, I think of myself as a microcultural anthropologist. Anthropology is a study of human behavior. And even through our day, all of you move through multiple microcultures in a day, whether it's your family, your friends, different sets of friends, or your office, different departments in the office. Accounting is probably more quiet and reserved. Advertising is more rowdy, right? All these different microcultures. And every time I meet somebody or I enter a new group or a new country, I go in the field, which in anthropological terms is observation mode. And I'm observing, what are the codes of conduct here? How are people dressed? How are they behaving? What is the slang they're using? What is the volume of voice they're speaking at? And I'm subconsciously adapting myself. I'm not losing who I am or my values, etc., but just adapting myself ever so slightly, again, so that there's that feeling of belonging. So they're comfortable around me, I'm comfortable around them, and we're a community.
In your book, you also cover how etiquette and this idea of social fluency can help us battle the global mental health crisis that has been happening since before COVID, but particularly post-pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about how social fluency can be used in that way?
I went to high school with Mark Zuckerberg. He was a year above me at my boarding school, Phillips Exeter Academy. The term Facebook actually comes from our school directory. It was called the photo address book, but everybody colloquially called it the Facebook. And so I saw everything that he did. He changed the world. I mean, Mark is an incredible human being who changed the world and connected us in so many ways. But with the rise of social media, you also see a rise in mental health catastrophes, especially amongst our kids. So Gen Z, right? They're feeling isolated, they're feeling alone. Put on top of that COVID, right? And then it's a double whammy. So I think that it's important now than ever before that we have etiquette to give us that sense of inclusion And that, I mean, research has shown that it helps us live longer and happier lives.
I love that answer. Absolutely is fundamental, right? It's first off what's in here and then what we put out into that world. No doubt we're going to cover more than a few etiquette tips in this conversation, Sara Jane. So let's start with perhaps the most important or the most relevant to this evening. People in this room tonight, many of them will have been seated next to total strangers. They might not know their dining companions, which is a potential social minefield, as we all know. So just in case anyone in here is suffering right now, what is the best way to extricate oneself from a dull conversation with a table mate without causing offense, without causing a scene? I'm sure nobody will need it, but just in case.
Well, the most elegant way to extricate yourself from a dull conversation, which I've done multiple times, especially if it's a group, is to, let's say the person next to you just keeps going on and on and on and on. I'm sure this is not happening this evening, but I'm sure it's happened to you before. Then I like to bring in another person into the conversation. So I'll say, Lee, you know, that stuff about the STM, it's so fascinating. David, are you listening to what Lee is saying? You would find this so fascinating. Lee, you have to tell David what you told me. It was fascinating.
You throw David under the bus to listen to me drone on.
And then I turn to Hugo and I'm like, Hugo, what are the newest hotspots to hit up for nightlife in Lan Kwai Fong these days?
Oh, you're cunning.
I mean, it's a way.
Sometimes you got to take no prisoners.
I thought that you were going to ask me, if you're at a table full of strangers, how you make conversation.
Right.
Or form bonds. And I often like to say it's about open questions. So, you know, you can ask closed questions and you can ask open questions. Let's do a little test. Gentleman over here, could you ask me a closed question? Are you in your need? Very well. Lady over here, could you ask me an open question? Who are you? Interesting.
Yes.
But the gentleman, what do you just said a very specific word. Why? Right? So a closed question, it can be answered in one word, yes or no, or one word, like what's your favorite food? Chocolate, right? An open question requires several sentences to answer. Why are you enjoying your evening? Why do you like chocolate? And with open questions, let me give you a tip. People love talking about themselves. Like you can have a conversation with someone and you're just asking them open questions and they divulge their whole life and they'll walk away. They'll be like, I just had such a good conversation with Lee, even though all they talked about was themselves.
Yeah.
And so the key is I like to see each person as a flower bulb, and through conversation, you let them blossom. So by asking them open questions, you're understanding what drives them, what motivates them, you know, their values, and it's just the best way to make a great impression, but also learn about something. Because you can learn something from everybody. They're from a different country, industry, upbringing, and I like to take it as an opportunity.
You have a saying in the book about the 20-second rule, right? Which is if you're talking about yourself for more than 20 seconds, watch out. Probably time to switch to a question, an open question about your companion.
Who's watched my Netflix show? If you watched my Netflix show, please raise your hand. Nice and high. Okay, about half the people here. That's interesting. So in the Netflix show, I talk about this traffic light rule, where if it's just you and another person, or let's say a social group, if you're speaking and you're under 20 seconds, it's green light. You're still good. If you go over 20 seconds, it's orange light. The other person's losing interest, you know, you're probably not getting their attention. You go over 40 seconds, you're officially self-obsessed.
Better watch out what I say. A lot of people view etiquette as a hangover of a more polite time and not something that is as relevant in today's kind of more brash world, and that good etiquette means being placid, a pushover, being a snobby Brit stuck in a time where they think that the person who did them dirty in a deal was frightfully ungentlemanly. You know, there's this kind of archaic idea of etiquette. Your take, and you go into this in the book, is that etiquette, when done properly, can actually make you become what you call Miss Machiavelli. How can we use etiquette to get ahead in professional life?
Yeah, so Miss Manners with a touch of Machiavelli. And so I have to make very clear that what I'm teaching is etiquette and not ethics. I'm not trying to be holier than thou and tell you how to be a good person. How you want to live your life is your choice. What I'm giving you is etiquette are the rules of society to be popular, well-liked, get ahead, climb the corporate ladder, do well in your relationships. That's the tools of what I'm giving you. So I would say that sorry, what was your original question again?
How can we use etiquette to get ahead?
Yes. So when you think about, for example, the way my book is structured, there's the love and relationships chapter, always popular. Social life, which is actually really takes up the most of etiquette because everybody from our best friend to somebody we just meet takes up social life. There's office etiquette, so your career and family. Stuff that hurts in family really cuts to the core. And then there's food and travel. So when I think of your life, right, when you're getting ahead in your life, it's sort of getting ahead in all these different things. But I think that the most important thing is to, if you can't be kind, at least be vague. And there are many examples of where things have happened where somebody asked me a question and my real thoughts are not very complimentary, but the way I answer does not offend. For example, I recently was in my husband's hometown where the food is typically amazing. It's in Zhejiang province. But we were taken to a restaurant where the food was absolutely awful. And out of the 20 dishes on the table, I only ate one dish, which was a fish head soup. The hostess came over and said, "Sara Jane, how do you like the food?" And my husband's looking at me like panicking, because he knows I'm a very direct person, but he's not quite sure what will come out of my mouth. And I said, "The fish head soup is the best dish here." Did I lie? No. Right? But I was completely truthful, but at the same time, I didn't offend her. And this is just one example of how etiquette can help you get ahead. I also like to give a quote of my Phillips Extract Academy classmate. Her name was Flora. And the book is also dedicated, part of it is dedicated to her. When I went over when I was 14 years old. So in Hong Kong, I went to Peak School and German Swiss International School. And it was a bit of a culture shock when I went over to the States. One day, I went to the dining hall, and I had a very late, it was like a 2, 3 p.m. late lunch. And when I got the food on my tray, I looked to see who to sit with. And there was one person there, Flora, and she was sitting on her own. And Flora was the most popular girl in our whole school. Every boy wanted to date her. Every girl wanted to be her best friend. And she was every single teacher's pet. She was also tri-varsity for cross-country swimming and diving. And she sang and she danced and she played the piano.
Quite easy to dislike, I imagine, or be envious of.
Oh, right. So imagine how, usually if all the boys want to date you, not all the girls want to be your best friend. And then not all the teachers will want you to be their teacher's pet, right? So how does she do this? So I take my tray, I go sit over her, next to her, and she's reading a book. And she looks up from her tray and she goes, "Sara Jane, I'm so glad you came over. I do have to let you know I'm not going to be very good company because I'm studying for an exam the next session, but it would still mean a lot to me if you came and sat with me." Think about that, from a 14-year-old girl from Willoughby, Ohio. I grew up with a tiger mom. I was not very good at expressing myself, right? But then the way so think about it, like she managed my expectations, right? She wasn't going to be sitting there chit-chatting to me because she had to study for an exam. But at the same time, she welcomed me. Some people would let you sit with them, but then be resentful because they feel like they have to entertain you and caught between studying and entertaining you. But the way she did that, she became my role model. When I think about the single one person who really affected me during my adolescence, when I was away from my parents, right, because I was at boarding school, it was Flora.
This is what you mean, from what I'm hearing, when you describe in your book etiquette as armor. It gives you the tools, it gives you the weapons to be able to manage any situation.
Exactly.
You have a self-described wicked sense of humor, Sara Jane. In the opening frames of the very first episode of your very first Netflix show, you make a fantastically filthy joke. And
Should we repeat it? I don't know.
well, let's see how the night goes. As someone who's also been known to crack wise when perhaps it wasn't the wise thing to do, personally, do you have any tips on how one can use cheeky humor and get away with it?
Yeah, so the opening show of and actually, I think Netflix decided to do a show with me based on this original scene, which before my Netflix show, back in 2014, I was interviewed by GQ magazine. So GQ magazine, they flew over from New York, they trailed me for a couple of days and just filmed me teaching my class. And as part of my class, there's one module called Tricky Foods, how to eat tricky foods elegantly. They include oysters, which are being served over there. Everything from oysters to different types of fruit. And a really fun one that's also really good for camera is the banana. So the opening scene of my Netflix
You might be able to see where this is going.
Well, I'm teaching her, my Steph, who's my student in episode 1, how to eat a banana elegantly using a knife and a fork. And so I say you cut off the head, and you slice off the tail, and then you cut the underbelly, and you flip the skin over. And she has a fork in her banana, and she goes, okay, my fork's in there. Do I keep it in there? And I say, don't pull out. So, you know, the fun thing is, like, I don't like to take things too seriously. And I always feel like you learn the most when you're having fun. And my students, whether they're my Chinese ladies in China or my students from my Netflix show or anywhere else, they always say and even people who watch my show, they always come up to me and say two things. They say, your show was so fun to watch, and I learned so much. And a lot of the times, I love using humor to ease any nervous tension. In episode 6 of my show with Bunny, I don't know if you guys remember that, I feng shuied her house.
Yeah.
And you know, we were feng shuiing her house on camera, and she's obviously a bit nervous, like what is the feng shui master going to say about her and her personal life on camera? And so and it was her first time doing feng shui, so I told her, yeah, you know, like he's just using your birth chart, and he's going to figure out the directions of your home, and then he'll tell you, you know, all the best money position, the best health position. And the best love position and the best sexual position. And she just started laughing. And when she started laughing, then all her nervousness washed away, and she just totally relaxed.
You used humor to disarm.
Yes, but also I really like to tell dirty jokes. I have a filthy sense of humor.
Yeah.
And I think we have to have fun along the way.
Absolutely. I noticed that in that opening scene, when you say that, really, you know, completely unnecessary, filthy joke, could have definitely gone by without it. You then flash this fantastic smile. It's like, I was just cheeky. And you talk about in your book about how sometimes if you don't know what to do in any given situation, the best thing to do is smile.
Yes. Because either whether it's because we just didn't understand what the person was saying because it was so noisy and loud and we don't want them to repeat themselves, or whether we're just so shocked by what somebody said to us that we don't know how to respond, the best reaction you give is a smile. I call it the Swiss Army knife of responses. People can interpret it in any way they want.
Can you give us an example of what that Swiss Army knife looks like?
Well, I also like to raise an eyebrow. I realize that's one of my superpowers. I can raise my eyebrows individually.
Oh, I wish
and I do it on camera, but it just comes naturally to me.
So while we have you, let's finish up with some etiquette lessons. In your book's chapter on love and relationships, you advise readers to resist criticizing their ex on a first date. Very sound advice. To wait until you feel like you can't possibly wait any longer before being intimate for the first time. Very sound advice.
Yep.
What else are some of the most important tips you want our audience to be armed with out there in the big bad dating world?
Oh yeah, one fun one. Oh, does it have to be dating? So I'm just curious, how many of you are single here? If you're single, raise your hand. Oh, quite a few. Okay. Well, the most common complaint I hear from women today is when they go on first dates, men only talk about themselves. And men are just like talking at the woman and not asking any questions of the woman. So I think whether dating or with friends or meeting new friends, you want to show interest. I call it non-sexual flirting. What is the definition of flirting? Flirting is showing sexual interest in someone. If you take away sexual, then it's just showing interest in someone. And when you show interest in somebody, they will think that you like them. And you know what? When they think you like them, they will like you back. And that creates for positive vibes and chemistry and the potential for a romance or a beautiful friendship.
I love that. It's like a superpower. It's a special trick.
Yeah.
Feign interest in somebody, spend 5 minutes asking them questions, and you can conjure those emotions in somebody. A growing irritation for many of us, me included, is bad digital etiquette. And that can include being glued to one's phone during a dinner, and particularly bad group chat etiquette. There's a big section in your book where you talk about do's and don'ts in a group chat. The FCC board and our various committees, we have numerous group chats, so this is something that I am personally very involved in. What are the key do's and don'ts in a WhatsApp group chat, be it a family chat, a friend chat?
Yeah, in my book, I have little digital sub-chapters at the end of each chapter because the digital world is really almost what takes up most of our life these days. We're always on our phones. For WhatsApp group chats, if let's say, so first of all, definitely don't spam the chat. No pictures of your pets, your kids, etc. If you start having a one-on-one with something, take it out of the group chat. Like the last thing the other 100 members want to see is the two of you taking up phone space and screen space, having a one-on-one. I would also say don't screenshot. I mean, this does happen all the time, and some very senior people all over the world have gotten into a lot of trouble for things they've said in email that have been forwarded, or in a WhatsApp group chat that has been screenshotted. So I remember when I started off my career, when I graduated from Georgetown, I did 2 years as an M&A, mergers and acquisitions analyst in New York City. And we were given a lot of training, and one of our managing directors said, don't write any email what you would not be comfortable with on the front page of the New York Times. Because that was 2007, 2008, around then there were a lot of scandals, and literally we would see like, analysts or chief economists from Morgan Stanley or blah, 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 Lehman, and their emails exchanges on the front page of the New York Times. So I would say that is definitely one of them, and you don't want to have fights. You don't want to have an argument over like Gaza versus Israel in front of everybody in the WhatsApp group chat. Really sensitive topics that people feel really emotional about on both sides.
That's fantastic. We had an in-depth conversation at the FCC Board of Governors about digital security in our various group chats. And I said, look, I mean, I think a rule of thumb has to be don't text something that you wouldn't be comfortable being read back to you in a court of law. It's pretty much the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Just make sure, keep yourself, because everything can be screenshotted. Nothing is truly personal or private anymore. Last question I'm going to ask Sara Jane before I open it up to the floor, and would love to hear your questions for Sara Jane. In the trailer and the first episode of your Netflix show, Mind Your Manners, you say, quote, "Come with me and you'll know what to do anywhere with anyone in any situation." Now, I have no doubt, particularly given everything we've heard in the last half an hour, you will be able to deliver on that promise, Sara Jane. And if you'll indulge me, I want to road test it a little bit. If you're game, improv style, I want us to suggest some places, a person, and a situation, and put to Sara Jane the best way to manage that situation. So, for example, it could be Santa Claus, the person, the place, on vacation, the situation, a kid recognizes him in the pool, and he's just trying to get out and enjoy his vacation. It could be a ridiculous situation, like the person, the US president, the place, in prison, the situation, they're trying to run the country. A ridiculous situation, which obviously will never, ever happen. But if our audience would be so kind as to shout out, please, a place, a person, and a situation. So first off, a place. Shout out.
Miami Beach.
Which beach?
Miami Beach.
Miami Beach, okay. A person.
Elon
Musk, excellent. A situation.
Yeah, he wants you to have his baby.
He wants you to have.
He wants you one of many women.
Elon
His
Musk
many babies.
on Miami Beach, and he wants you to be his latest co-parent.
And you know what? I think the half Asian lady did it the smartest. She said, "I'm not going to have sex with you. Sure, we can use your sperm. We'll use my eggs. We have twins, and you pay for everything."
So that would be how you deal with that situation.
That's just the most recent woman who he had kids with. As opposed to being Grimes, who, they fell in love. She loved him. She had his kids. And then she only finds out after the kid is born that he's had other kids with this other woman.
So I'm Elon. Hey, Sara Jane.
Yeah.
Sun's nice today.
Yeah. Well, you're very pasty. Make sure you put on your sunblock.
I'm very pasty. Imagine I'm wearing a big hat, umbrella. Yeah, it's a sexy look with a black umbrella. And I say, hey, I'm going to make $50 billion this year. I want to have a kid together. How do you get out of that situation?
I would say, I'd love to, Elon, but you should really check with my husband first.
That's the directness we were talking about. Excellent. Okay, let's do one more.
With men like Elon, you have to be direct.
Right.
They're so super direct.
Right. Speaking, and I guess, does that reflect to being empathetic and reflecting somebody else's style?
Yeah, it's almost, exactly. It's really mirroring it. What's funny, when I just finished wrapping up shooting my Netflix show, which was shot in Sydney, a girlfriend of mine from China was like, oh my God, you're in Sydney, you have to see my brother, he's throwing a party at our house in Sydney. I said, okay. I didn't know anything about the brother. They just, he WhatsApped me the address, I went over there, and it was there were 30 boys that were 21 years old, and then there were like 10 girls that were their girlfriend. They were like 19. And I was 36. 35, 35. Oh, just turned 36. And I was newly single because I broke up with my FCC club boyfriend over text message on day 9 of shooting the show. Because I was like, here I am teaching my students to be their best selves. And over here I have this boyfriend who's like really bringing me down. Broke up over text. So I was newly single. I hadn't met my husband yet. And I arrive, and I knew like they had a really nice house and a pool and everything, so I'm there in my bikini. But it was like all like 21-year-old boys. And I never told them my age. I hung with them. We told dirty jokes, played beer pong. I hung out with all the girlfriends. Like I became like besties with the 10 girlfriends. And then at the end of it, they were talking about like their age or something. And then they were like, yeah. And then they were like, Sara Jane, how old are you? And I was like, well, why don't you guess my age? And they were like, 24, 25. And I was like, no, I'm like much older. They kept going up and up. And I was like, I'm 36. And they were shocked. Not because of the way I looked, but because of like, I acted like a 21-year-old when I was hanging out with them.
You mirrored them.
Exactly. So to them, they felt like, okay, yeah, she's like one of us. She's like acting like a 21-year-old.
You mirrored them, so they didn't realize your age, and good genes. They did both of them together. I realized, Sara Jane, we had a tour of the FCC earlier.
Yeah.
We went up and down on every floor in every single room. And I didn't know this little fun fact about the X. You held your head high. You didn't worry for 1 second you might bump into him?
No, I'm like looking for him. Where is he? I want to see him and say hi. No.
Okay, let's do one more. A place, a person, and a situation. A place first. Disneyland, okay. A person. The X.
We should make it FCC in the X then.
Okay, the FCC, the X, and we know the situation.
Honestly, I would treat him as though he were a long-lost cousin, because that's how I feel about him. So he's like some distant relative. And I would actually be very happy to see him, and I would say I'm so happy to see you. How are you? I hope you're well.
It goes back to what you were saying earlier about showing interest in somebody. As in like being interested in somebody's story and listening to them. People just react well to that.
Yeah, not that I'm trying to show interest in my ex.
Sure.
He's my ex for a reason. But I wouldn't be fazed at all. And in fact, that's also a trick. Even if you are fazed, act like you're not fazed, because indifference is the highest form of power, really. When you show that somebody's not able to make you upset, when they're unable to ruffle your feathers, and you act cool as a cucumber, indifference is the highest level.
Fantastic. We're really happy to take questions from the floor. Please do put your hand up. That gentleman over there was first. The microphone is going to come to you, sir, so that we can all hear you.
I'm going to be awful and ask 2 related questions. So there's been a lot of complaints recently, post-COVID. Bosses complaining that their young Gen Z employees don't know how to act in an office. They don't know how to be professional. First question is, do you put any stock in these kind of complaints? Like, do Gen Z, people in general, whether the opposite way, like they don't know how to act? And number two, maybe more general, how much do the rules of etiquette translate to the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question and I actually address it in my book. It's a real problem that Gen Zers are not going to the office because so much of how you are trained in your career and your career development is by osmosis. It's by seeing how your superiors dress, how they behave, how they speak to a client. And if you're not in the office, you have a whole generation that have just missed out on that for 3 years, basically. And then there are also some quirks such as older people like to call. And for younger kids, Gen Zers these days, if you call them unannounced, they have a panic attack. They just want to text. Keep it to text. Also, there's this whole thing of like being your authentic self in the office. Older generations, there's very much a drawn line. This is my personal life. I don't bring it into my work life. For Gen Zers, they view that as inauthentic. They'll say, you're not bringing your whole self. You're not being an authentic person. I do think etiquette changes with the times. And a lot of etiquette that 50 years ago, 70 years ago, 80 years ago, a young man and a young woman could not be alone together without a chaperone, right? Even just etiquette like that doesn't translate to today. And so it'll be interesting to see how etiquette will change in another 10, 20, 30 years. To me, etiquette is changing every 5 years. Every 5 years, we're seeing a change in etiquette.
Mm.
It's
being sped up by technology?
Completely.
You know how do you mime taking a phone call? Right? You know how Gen Z do it? They don't know anything beyond a flat phone. You ask a Gen Z person to mime taking a call, they'll do that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. My geriatric millennial self is very surprised by that. Who else has a question? Anybody over here? The gentleman over here has a second question. Oh, let's go to this lady over here, and if we have time, sir, we'll come back to you.
Hello. I don't know if, yes, it is on. I found your chapter on introductions very helpful. How do you deal with a situation where you have to introduce someone, you've known them for years, you really like and respect them, and you have forgotten their name?
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah. I'm forgetting people's names all the time because I always go to a lot of events with a lot of people, and I'm in different cities. And I posted a video, so my Instagram handle is Sara Jane Ho, and I'm often posting etiquette content because I get a lot of direct messages with questions like these, like, oh, what do I do when I forget somebody's name at a party? And I recently did a video replying to the question, and I said that I did it for Oprah Daily, and I put it up on my Instagram. I will never admit to letting on, to confessing that I forgot somebody's name. I will say, yes. I'll say, yes, when did we meet again? Right, so I'm trying to pick up cues. I'll say, was it last year? What city did we meet in? And they'll usually fill it in. They'll say, oh, at Paul's birthday party in Lantau Island, or da-da-da-da. And as it's picking up cues, and I know, okay, which friend group it is, or da-da-da-da, and then I pretty much can figure it out. Or if I really can't figure it out, then I'll say, by the way, like, am I following you on Instagram yet? What is your handle? Or I'll say, oh, you know, I recently switched my phone and I lost a bunch of contacts. Do you mind putting it back in here? Now, a bunch of American followers in the comments said, this is so inauthentic. It's America for you, right? Well, I just realized we're being recorded again. Okay. They said, this is so inauthentic.
Don't get the internet in America. No.
This is so inauthentic. And I would rather just straight up tell the person I forgot their name rather than lying. And so then, but I really love comments like that make me think harder. It expands my mind. And then I responded to them and I said, I figured out why. I said, I'm from an Asian culture. In an Asian culture, if you let on that you forgot somebody's name, you're making them lose a lot of face. You're basically telling them they're not important and they're unforgettable, and that is a much greater offense than saying, than pretending like blah, blah, blah. Whereas in the States, people would not, like, there isn't that whole shame and face culture in America. There's some of it, but not as extreme as Asia. And so that's why it's not as offensive to tell an American, like, oh, I forgot your name. Like, can you remind me your name again? And that's why I always say that in etiquette, there is no right or wrong. It's contextual. It depends on who you're with, what culture you're in, and it's just, about speaking that other person's language, so to speak. I was recently on a podcast where, and this clip then went viral, and I talked about gift giving and the difference in gift giving between Asian countries and the States. And I said that in Asian countries, if somebody gives me a gift, I'll tuck it away. I'll say thank you, but I'll tuck it away, and I won't open it until you leave.
Yeah.
But in America, if you give me a gift, I make a huge fuss of it, I open it in front of you, I read the card, and then I say, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I wanted. I'm going to use it on my next vacation in the south of France. And then when I'm next using it, I take a photo of it on social media and I tag you on Instagram stories.
Right. Or if I hate it, I just don't tell you.
Yeah. If I hate it, I still say I love it. This is just what I want.
Exactly.
And then I love reading the comments for this. There are a bunch of comments that said, and they were American comments, that said, in Asia, you give the gift for the benefit of the person receiving it. In America, you give the gift to feed the ego of the person giving it.
Oh.
And then there was another comment that said, from now on, I'm only going to receive gifts the Asian way. So it's just really fun, but it shows you the cultural differences.
I was at an office leaving party, and the person leaving was given a gift, a British person, and they started opening it, and everybody around them went, what the hell are you doing? He immediately was told to tuck it away.
Is he American? Maybe
He was British.
No, okay.
But similar cultural differences. I'm so happy that you asked that question about names, because you just are trying not to hurt someone's feelings by doing that, right? I think we all suffer from that. I will jump through as many hoops as I possibly can to avoid letting on that I don't know their name. My memory being what it is, perhaps some people in the room are the same. I can remember multiple details about somebody, but I can't remember their name. So I'll say, oh, yeah, last time I saw you, you were just planning that trip to Bali. How was it? Or, oh, is your kid still enjoying their violin lessons? And they'll leave thinking I know everything about them, but I can't for the life of me recall their name, because I don't want to hurt their feelings. It feels like that's what so much of what your book is about, making people feel important and feel good.
And actually, a great tip for if you forgot somebody's name is to introduce another person to them.
Yeah.
So, I'll say, oh, David, have you met my friend? And then David will be like, hi, I'm David. And you'll be like, hi, I'm Lee.
Lee.
But sometimes it's annoying. Some people will be like, hi, and they won't say their name.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll be like, David, can you get that person's name?
That's a party foul when people do that. Because everybody knows that trick, right? When someone's doing it, and then the person doesn't say their name, you're like...
Yeah, like, I'll be like, hi, I'm Sara Jane Ho. And the person will be like, hi, Sara Jane. Can you say your name?
Like they're the president, and you should know what their name is. Yeah, absolutely. I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions if they're quick. The gentleman back there with the fantastic Elon Musk suggestion earlier.
So this is a real-life situation.
Great,
It
I
actually
love real-life
happened,
situations.
It happened next door to here. This is Hannah. So Hannah and I walked into this gallery, and a woman comes up to me and excitedly starts talking to me. And she uses the wrong name. And I'm not this person. Now the question is, should I correct her or not? And then I'll tell you what I actually did.
It happened to me this morning as well.
Firstly, it depends how personal she's getting, and it depends on your mood. Whenever, let's say sometimes if this happens to me, if I'm in a playful mood, sometimes I can be a bit of a prankster, and I'll kind of go along with things. But usually, if I'm not feeling particularly playful, I'll just be like, oh no, I'm not that person. I'm Sara Jane Ho. And then they'll be like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm so sorry. Blah, blah, blah. And I'll be like, oh, that's all right. And then, but you chat anyway. What did you do?
Oh, wait, so the microphone
just let
is
it
right
continue.
there.
I just let her continue talking to me. What was the guy's name? Freddie? Something like this?
No, what happened was she was with this man. So Paul, this is Paul, and she was there with a man named Paul. So at some point, I can't hear this any longer. She keeps thinking that we're at this event we were at. So I go, actually, this is Paul. And she says, no, he's Paul. Like, her date is Paul. I go, but he's also Paul. And she just stood there for a second, and I was like, well, it's good to see you again. And then we left, but.
Yeah, so generally speaking, if somebody says something wrong, like for example, if somebody says, oh yeah, because in Indonesia it's a population of 300 million, you can either go the route of saying, no, the population of Indonesia is 240 million. Or you can let it go. And generally speaking, so long as like nobody else is acting on that information, like if it's like a wrong train time, then I would jump in there and be like, no, actually the Hong Kong Airport Express takes 24 minutes, not 1 hour, right? Then, because if somebody's going to be using that info. But if it's harmless, I just let it go.
It's good advice. A couple of weeks ago, I bumped into a guy I haven't seen for a while, and it was very friendly. We had a nice conversation, and I later told my wife, I came home, and I said, oh, I bumped into that guy. We had a nice chat. I can't remember. Is it Brendan or Brandon? And my wife said, oh, it's Brendan. And she kind of gave me a bit of a hard time. She was like, you should know that. You should pay more respect and pay more attention. You should know that, of course, it's Brendan. Anyway, this morning, a couple of weeks after that incident, I bumped into him again. And my name is Lee. And he said, oh, hey, Luke, how you doing? And I'd been reading your book the night before, so was very much thinking about, that face, and if it doesn't matter, not doing anything. He said, hi, Luke, how's it going? I went, hey, Brendan, because I knew his name from that check. And he still thinks my name is Luke, and that's totally fine. We have maybe time for one more question. Okay, moderator's prerogative. I'm going to ask the final question. Sara Jane, we've covered so much ground. It's been such a really deep and meaningful conversation, but also a really fun one at the same time, and thank you for that. What is one etiquette tip? One tip, if people remember and take out into their lives, what should it be?
I would say smiling upon eye contact, especially when it's within our community. So for example, this community is the FCC community. So if you walk past another stranger, they're very likely another member or part of the community or a guest of a member. If you make eye contact, smile. Same thing in your office, in your building that you live in, with your neighbors. And because, first of all, it's completely free, right? It's at no cost to you. If you smile, there's actually been behavioral studies shown that if you smile, it makes you feel happy on the inside. And the joy you bring to other people is reflected back in it's just positive vibes. And remember, again, when people think that you're nice to them or that you like them, they'll like you back. And it's just, I think it's what is really needed in the world at this moment.
Absolutely. Hear to that. Please join me in expressing our extreme appreciation for the fantastic Sara Jane Ho. Thank you, Sara Jane.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'd also like to add that my newest venture, because in my Netflix show I brought out a lot of traditional Chinese medicine, for those of you that watched it. And I didn't anticipate that my viewers would really lean into that. So this year I launched Anti-Vorta, which is the pink leaflet that you see. And it is an intimate wellness brand, so for women's most intimate parts, formulated with traditional Chinese medicine. And when I think of my career and everything I've done in the last 10 years, or that I'm about to do in the next 10 years, it's crossed two realms. One realm is East meets West, so bridging East and West. So whether that's my finishing school or this TCM brand. And the other realm is empowering women to move through the world more confidently. So Anti-Vorta is an extension of that brand, and do take a look at it. And thank you very much, Lee. Thank you, everybody, for coming today.
Thank you, Sara.